Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley here in Moscone West. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with Jeff Martin, VP of Product at Men.io. Hello, Jeff. Welcome.
Hey, nice to see you, Mike. I really wish I had your voice. Man, that's a great radio voice there.
Completely faking it. But what we're not faking it is the application security. I host that podcast, and so it's near and dear to my heart. And there's all kinds of packages out there that are, they've got vulns, they've got issues, but they've got more than just vulnerabilities too. Tell us about some of these gnarly packages we should worry about.
So, it's one thing we've been really working on in the past couple of years. We kind of got ahead of it before it really hit, which was really nice to see when it actually really started trending, that we were all set for it. Look, everything in safety revolves around trust. And most people trust their supply chain. But there's huge chunks of the supply chain that's kind of automated behind the scenes when you pull in packages. So you're pulling in these packages and libraries, and you trust them, and that's great. And there's some great known vulnerabilities, and all the responsible people are disclosing them, and oh, we got to update and fix this.
Yes.
But, I mean, really what I'm talking about is it's supply chain malware. It's intentionally malicious packages that are being put out to either take the place of, or in some cases directly leverage the trust you already have in that supply chain. And
the classic example of typo squatting.
Yes.
Because we humans are still typing and maybe making a mistake or so.
Yeah. Instead of typing log for J or something, you're typing log J4, and suddenly you're bringing in, a Trojan horse into your code. And most SCA tools don't detect it because it's a new package. It might have been out for 5 minutes. Or, the other big attacks tend to leverage existing communities. So
it's that trust, as you were saying.
Exactly. A new contributor suddenly pops in and throws in some malicious behavior. In one recent case, a developer, well-known package existing for a while, he decided that he was really sick of not getting paid. And so he made the program not work anymore and just showed a message that said, basically, pay me. And there he goes. Now he just broke everybody.
That's surprising. Yeah, that kind of protestware, we've seen examples of that. There was another example I remember, I think it was NPM, developer didn't want to apply MFA.
Yeah.
And then everything started breaking, and people are wondering why. Was I hijacked? What happened here?
And it really does leverage that. And look, there's only so many ways you can protect this. You can't watch all of your open source communities. That's not a thing that's actually feasible.
Right.
There's no good way to handle this manually. These attacks tend to be removed actually pretty quickly. I know that because we remove them. We actually
That's good.
We scan NPM, Maven. Within about 5 minutes of any new package being uploaded, we've analyzed it for whether or not it's malicious. And we take in other accounts too, like is it a brand new package from a contributor nobody's ever seen before, right? Is this somebody we should trust? But we actually run some automated behavior analysis and actually determine, hey, wait a minute, this is behaving in this way. And we report that back to NPM or Maven, and, within a day or so, it gets removed. But meanwhile, everybody who downloaded it, they've already got it in their code.
Yes.
So it's existing for that day. That's a big deal. So, we put a lot of focus on zero-day known vulnerabilities, but not as much focus has been traditionally put on these things, which aren't vulnerabilities. They're attacks. This is actual malware.
They are, and the other side of that spectrum too is these are our assets. There's also, for the longest time, 20 years, if not longer, we're talking about asset inventory. Everyone should have that, but it's sort of like, how many people have a good one?
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to things, we're at RSA, right? So tons of people have been talking about S-bombs and this, that, the other thing. If an S-bomb is just your ingredient list, which is really all it is, what a malicious package is just making sure your ingredients aren't actually poisoned. It's very important to know where your pieces are coming from. But just like a recipe, you need to know other things too. Is it fresh? Is it 30 years old?
Right, and you were mentioning too, especially trust. That's touching on the identity. So SBOM, Salsa, a lot of these are also talking about provenance. Where did it come from? And a couple of examples you pointed out were this was the owner that was actually making the change. But in some cases, it can also be, I'll call it sort of laundering trust. Someone might come out and subsume, buy out a package, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, look, if I was going to be on the black hat side of things, that's what I would do. You need to leverage trust to be able to attack, basically. And people trust open source. They trust it because it's open. But that same openness really has that same openness, all the benefits of it are great. The downside is anybody can go in. Anybody can contribute. Anybody. Right. You have to be able to sort the good from the bad.
So tell us about that sorting, because from the developer perspective, I hope it's not that I have to do a line-by-line code review of all my dependencies now.
Of course.
And they could have GPG keys, but do I have to go through and check that GPG byte by byte visually and inspect it? That sounds kind of painful.
It's funny. We have a phrase we use, like, you got to put AppSec on autopilot, right? But it's a good analogy. I'm full of analogies today. It's the end of RSA. Everybody's punching. But
carry on.
Yeah. So look, you can't do this stuff manually. There's too much of it. There's too much going on. So we we advise that people do a twofold approach.
Okay.
Prevent things from being entered that you don't know. Prevent the things, like I said, we detect in about 5 minutes. So great. We can tell you before you put it in.
Clock is ticking.
Yeah, right? But we can tell you before you put it into your code, this is malicious. Don't do that.
Yes.
Great. That's the easy stuff. The problem is, and we see this in our customer base as an SCA vendor, large chunks of people have old code. Amazing, right? Most code already exists. Well, that pre-existing code has malicious packages in it. Tons of them. When we first started getting into this, we were a little shocked how many malicious packages were introduced, 6 months ago into a code base that nobody's messed with for a year. And
nobody wants to touch either, right?
Nobody wants to touch it. Yeah. Nobody's looking at it. But it's out there in the real world with malware effectively in it. It's absolutely astounding.
Yeah, and I think some of it is too, you're talking about preventive, but there's also detective, right?
Right.
And I think that's where we talk about, not that you have to fix every single vuln right now within a 7-day period. I look at that and hear, how mature is the team that they can just respond to it, and they know that they could eventually find an owner or something like that.
It's funny because we recently rolled out this detection value to our customers. So we now, as part of our SCA tool, detect malicious packages and tell you, hey, in your inventory, this thing right there, that's malicious. And my favorite question from the, let's say, less mature organizations is, what do I do about that? I'm like, well, what would you do if you had a virus on your computer? You remove it. Like, get rid of that. Oh, really? Yes, really. You should take out the malware. Is it more important than a known vulnerability? Yes, it's an attack. Remove the attack first. This is much more important than any 0-day. You're actually under attack.
Yeah, and I think that having that context is really helpful for developers and for AppSec teams, because a lot of the decision isn't so much, I hope we've gotten away from every vulnerability exists that needs to be fixed now. Like, well, what about the ones that we worry about? What are the ones that impact us? Let us prioritize to a few dozen rather than a few hundred.
I mean, I get asked like 50 times a week, how do we set up our AppSec program to make sure that our SCA and our vulnerabilities, our dependencies are, well handled, and we don't have attacks going on or big vulnerabilities we got to worry about later. And the answer is so, I don't know, trite, but one, keep up to date on things. If you just keep your dependencies up to date, you've solved 80, 90%.
It's a good discipline,
right? And it's better functionally too. You have all sorts of good benefits for that. Do that. Automate it. You can't do that manually. Just automate it. And then the second part is, you have to prioritize the risks you got left. So malicious package should be at the top of your list. Get that out of there. That's an attack. But below that, not all vulnerabilities are made equal. Some of them, you can't even reach the vulnerable method. Great. We tell you, deprioritize that one. Other ones, sure, there's CVSS, but CVSS is kind of just the starting point. There's so much more to prioritization. And you can't do it manually. If you're doing it manually, you're too slow.
Yes, and I think, and there's been a theme, honestly, throughout the day, throughout this week that we've heard, just automation as a way to help developers, help teams, because honestly, there's a lot of drudgery, there's a lot of boring things to do, and if you can just automate keeping things up to date. Now, I will say, like, talking about some versions, the minor point release is pretty easy. It's those major updates that yes, some of those upgrades staying up to date can be hard, but that's honestly probably where you should be focusing engineering effort anyway.
We actually put a lot of effort into that in the last year.
Yeah.
Because we have a thing called Merge Confidence.
Okay.
So we own Renovate, the big open source dependency health. So we can see when people update whether or not it breaks their build. And so we just surface that data and we say, hey, everybody who went from this version to this version, nobody broke their build. Don't worry about it. So even a major can oftentimes really not introduce any functional risk.
That's wonderful. Yeah, just having confidence that this will, like you said, just stay updated.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about the security part of that. We're just saying,
so if you stay updated and you're screening for the malicious packages and removing them when you find them immediately, you're pretty well set. That's kind of that's why we were calling about autopilot, right? All the drudgery work, it's like cruise control on the highway. Can't take your eyes off the road. I mean, you can't start reading a book while you're on cruise control yet. But you also don't have to pay as much attention. It can automatically follow the car in front of you and things.
Yes, or do something more interesting with your development time, I think.
Yes. Don't develop while you're driving, though. That's bad.
That's probably very bad. You gave us a little bit of a sense of some of the problem space. The idea that there's a lot of legacy software out there, orphaned systems. Who owns them? Give us a sense of kind of the volume you've seen of just the number of packages that orgs are trying to take care of, which points to why there needs to be automation.
I mean, the problem is it keeps growing. Every time I have a stat, it's like it just doubles again every 6 months.
Oh, dear.
But, I mean, think about the size of the average application as we've moved to cloud native. It's stopped being just, we don't even measure it in lines of code anymore. You can't count them. But you're bringing in all these dependencies, thousands, tens of thousands of dependencies in an average application, and then each of those have transitive dependencies. And I mean, this is why we all spend so much time at RSA here talking about S-bombs and everything else. Just knowing what you have is a huge challenge.
Just knowing what you have. And it's so funny that that's so simple. Knowing what you have, stay up to date. Half of the RSA exhibitor floor could possibly go away if we did that.
I mean, honestly, it's like, can you imagine a world where the FDA would have to regulate food and nobody knew what was any of the food, in any of it, right? So it has to be automated. It's just the speed of things nowadays.
It's just the speed of things. Well, we sped through this conversation quite well, and I think we need to let you go back onto plane, train, or automobile, whichever is your choice to get home, Jeff.
I got to put it on autopilot, apparently. Stick to my theme.
That sounds good. If you'd like to learn more about mend.io, visit securityweekly.com/mend-RSAC. And this wraps up our RSA Conference 2023. Thank you to Sam, to Renee, and to Blake for keeping things organized behind the scenes. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. If you'd like to see any and all of our interviews from this week, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. And please stay secure, stay subscribed, check out our family of podcasts at securityweekly.com. Be seeing you.